Testing. All right, there we go. Well, good. Well, welcome everybody to our special board meeting this evening. This is the June 27th, and we'll start off our meeting tonight. And we're going to ask Director Doug Erdman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be shown on the screens. Thank you, Doug. We'll start off with a roll call tonight. Our clerk of the board is Jody Brennan. And Jody, do you want to note that we are all here, or do you want a roll call? Okay, well, very good. Thank you. We'll move right along then. Before we start the public comments, we'll do a little housekeeping. Most importantly, restrooms are on that end of the building. And then we'll go. We have some guidelines for tonight's speakers. So if you've intended to speak, when you came in this evening, you had the opportunity to sign up and fill out a speaker card. If you haven't filled out the speaker card, please go over to the table and talk to Lalani, and she will get you in line in the order. And comments will be accepted at the microphone, and speakers will follow the order in which speaker cards are received. Our clerk of the board is keeping a list of the speakers to make sure everyone gets to speak, and that everyone is given equal time. Each speaker will be given one opportunity to speak 3 minutes. And so Jody will call the speakers up 3 at a time. And at the third speaker, she will announce the next 3. That way it'll accommodate moving along this evening. And the speaker timer, Jody will have a timer clock. It'll start with green, it'll turn yellow, and it'll present a courtesy beep when there's 1 minute left. And when it turns red at the end of the 3 minutes, we'll please ask you to be promptly to wrap up, and we'll thank you for your comments. So with that, we will entertain any, we'll go into the next item of the agenda is oral comments and public communication, and it's on any item that's not on the agenda. And so at this time, do we have any requests, Jody, to speak that are during the comment period?
We'll just take them all during the public hearing.
Oh, everything will be through public hearing then. Okay, very good. Thank you. So that takes us on to the new business. So our new business this evening is the Doheny Ocean Desalination Project. So tonight we will have before us a resolution 29/1819 entitled "A Resolution of the Board of Directors of the South Coast Water District certifying the Doheny Ocean Desalination Project final EIR as adequate under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, adopting mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the Doheny Ocean Desalination Project, Phase 1 local project, and make written findings pursuant to CEQA, Phase 1 local project only, and approving and directing the staff to proceed with the project, Phase 1 only, and delegating authority to the staff to execute and file a notice of determination. So at this time, I am going to ask our general manager, Mr. Rick Shintako, at my left, your right, and he will do the staff report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to stand. It's a little easier for me. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rick Shintako, General Manager of South Coast Water District. Thank you so much for spending your time and spending your time with us on this EIR hearing. So I have a question for you all. How many of you would rather be here at this EIR meeting than doing your favorite hobby? Kevin, you can raise your hand. Well, thank you, and that's what I mean. You know, your time is valuable, and you spending this time with us means a lot to us. So what I see this as is a public agency meeting. Many of those who know me as a collaborator. I want to hear all the viewpoints, opposition, support, concerns, all of that. So I want, and that's going to equip our board to select the right path on this project. So also, after the EIR is approved, I have my cards here, so I would like to make that invitation open to all of you to give me a call for anything that in regard to this project or any other project in the district. I'd like to hear from you. So I want to acknowledge the team first that worked on this project, and also some distinguished guests that have come tonight. So I want to introduce as well. So when I call your name, if you don't mind standing up so the audience knows who you are. Kevin Thomas from Kimley Horn, who's the leader on this EIR project. Mark Donovan, our program manager from GHD, our program manager for the project itself. Dr. Scott Jenkins from Michael Baker International, who worked on the brine discharge modeling. And we have several from geoscience here, or a couple of them, Brian Villalobos and John Senier, who worked on the hydrogeologic modeling effort, NBC Aquatic Sciences, and the Environmental Document Review Team, which consists of Carrie Vosnelek, Art Kidman, and Pat Chen. Wanted to also thank Sarah Camille and Sarah from Katz and Associates, and South Coast Water District staff. Our Chief Operations Officer is here, Joe McDevitt. Pamela Arenz King, our CFO, is here. And she helped us quite a bit with a lot of the grant efforts. Sonia Morgan, our PIO. Mark Cerna, our Chief Engineer. Sarah Mathis, who retired but worked quite a bit on this project as well. Taryn Kosing, Principal Engineer. Larry Frigine, who's in charge of recycled water and conservation. Greg Pennington, our Assistant Chief Operations Officer. Kyle Goff, Steve Deshawn, Brian Lynn, Jody Brennan, Leilani Ayers. I also wanted to introduce the MODOC board and staff who are here. I just saw Megan U. Schneider from the MODOC board. Rob Hunter, the general manager, is here, and Carl Seckel. And much thanks to their staff, Charles Buslinger and Heather Baez, their Ledge Affairs manager. Eric Jessen is here. He's with the South Laguna Water Sewer Advisory Committee, instrumental in, and Cal is here as well with that committee. SACWA staff, I wanted to recognize them for working with us on some of these efforts. And let's see here, and Cindy Gitter from Congressman Levin's office. If I missed anyone, someone let me know. Lastly, I want to give credit to Andy Brunhart, who was our prior general manager, who worked very hard on this project. He passed away in December of this year, and he was instrumental in getting us to this point. So please keep his family in your thoughts. So tonight's agenda will consist basically of a presentation. We're going to start with a presentation. I'm going to kick that off. Mark Donovan, our program manager, is going to talk about the project description. And Kevin Thomas, our EIR consultant, is going to talk about the EIR aspects in the presentation. After the presentation, we're going to have public comment. So please fill out the cards, make your comments. We appreciate it. After that, the board of directors will discuss. So one thing I wanted to make clear, that any approvals and all approvals that happen tonight doesn't mean we're going to construct the project. What that means is that allows staff to go through the next steps. So you may have seen when you walked in here a resolution, and if you don't, raise your hand. We'll get you one. And on section 11 of the resolution, this is what your resolution looks like. So toward the back of the resolution, you're going to see section 11, and it spells out that construction of the project shall not commence until all conditions are met to the satisfaction of the board. And you'll see 5 conditions on there. These include completion of the third-party peer-reviewed cost analysis for the project, which will include workshops with the board. securing the relevant permits from the responsible and trustee agencies, obtaining agreements or construction approvals necessary for the Phase 1 local project, which is the 5 MGD that's up here for project level CEQA. The fourth one, development and approval of a project delivery and construction contract in compliance with the district's fiscal policies, including all applicable bond and loan covenants. That's a big one. So that has to go back to the board for approval as well. And solicitation of partnerships in the Phase 1 local project from agencies that may have an interest or derive benefit from direct participation in this project. We feel this is one of those projects that can provide multiple benefits, as you'll see in the presentation, and we want to be able to share that with other agencies who are interested. So now I would like to introduce Arthur Kidman, our legal counsel, who will specifically discuss what the board's roles and responsibilities in considering this EIR are for potential approval. Thank you, Art.
I want to come over here because I'm actually giving a tutorial to the board. So I'm going to stay kind of close to my text because I have a tendency to go down rabbit holes. So first of all, the purpose of an EIR, or the purpose of why you're here tonight, is a final EIR is legally required as a predicate to approval of the project. Prior to approving the project, the board as a decision-making body for that district, as the lead agency must, one, certify that the final EIR has been completed in compliance with CEQA. Secondly, find that changes have been incorporated into the project which mitigate any significant environmental effects that are identified in the EIR. Third, the resolution would adopt a mitigation monitoring plan to assure the mitigation measures are carried out. The final EIR is comprised of the draft EIR, which has been out for some time, circulated to the public, and public comments have been received. And the third item that's part of the final EIR is then the SCWD responses to those public comments. And together, those things comprise the final EIR. The EIR addresses environmental issues only. The EIR does not address other public policy issues that may be involved in the ultimate project approval, such as the need for the project or its technical or fiscal feasibility and community support. These policy issues are not up for determination tonight. They have been studied in detail already by numerous public workshops conducted by the board over several years. And as the general manager has indicated, we have off-ramps still ahead if some of these public policy issues indicate that the project should not go forward. Now, then the board, your role in this process. It's unusual here. We have 4 out of the 5 members who are professional engineers. But when you're acting as a director, you're not acting as a PE. As a director, you're expected to act with common sense and not technical expertise. As a director, you're entitled to immunity for your official actions unless your actions are undertaken for corrupt purposes. In other words, unless your vote is quite literally criminal. So I'm not expecting anything along those lines, but there have been some concern that maybe board members, might have some liability relative to carrying out their duties in respect to this EIR. That's not likely, put it that way. The board's role is not to weigh and evaluate facts and opinions, both expert and lay, or both pro and con. Weighing is not your job. The board is not to reach its own independent conclusions or professional judgment relative to the evidence presented in the EIR. The board's role is much more limited. The board's role is to reach a group decision about whether the conclusions of the EIR are supported by substantial evidence. So, what is substantial evidence? So there's several definitions that are actually set right out in the California Environmental Quality Act, the law under which we are proceeding. Substantial evidence is not a burden of proof, like beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not even a preponderance of the evidence, or it's also not clear and convincing evidence. Those are all different legal burdens of proof. Substantial evidence is a standard of review, and that's what you, as a board, are doing, is reviewing the evidence in the EIR to make sure that there is some support, like showing your homework, back in 8th grade math. So substantial evidence is a standard of review, which is very deferential to the decision maker, you. It means that substantial evidence includes facts, reasonable assumptions predicated upon facts, and expert opinions supported by facts. And by the way, you are entitled to rely on the experts that the Water District has engaged for this purpose. Substantial evidence does not include argument, speculation, unsubstantiated opinion, or narrative, or clearly erroneous or inaccurate assertions or evidence of social or economic impacts that are not related to physical impacts on the environment. Substantial evidence means enough relevant information and reasonable inference from this information that support a conclusion, even though other conclusions may also be reached. So it's a fairly low standard. You need to make the decision. We've had agencies around here locally that tripped up on this sort of thing. You got to show your work. You got to make sure that that is the EIR needs to show where the supporting evidence for its conclusions come from. So 2 takeaways to wrap up here. An EIR does not address public policy issues apart from avoiding adverse physical effects on the environment. Number 2, you as a board are not required to reach scientific certainty as to the adequacy of the EIR. You are only required to determine if evidence presented in the final EIR, including expert opinion, supports conclusions of the EIR. So that's it, and with that, I will turn it over to Kevin Thomas to really present the program.
Thank you, Art. Actually, my name's Kevin Thomas with Kimley Horn. I'm just going to briefly amplify what I think Art covered very well in terms of the role of the board and the role of the board's consulting team. So I think Art covered it. Rick Shintaku introduced the technical team the board's been relying upon, district staff, for the last 3 years. In addition to all the technical team that is here, Rick mentioned the program manager, Mark Donovan, his firm GHD, an international design firm recognized for its desalination expertise. The GHD team includes a number of scientists that we were able to benefit from over the last 3 years. So the technical team that the board has deployed has done our due diligence in preparing an environmental impact report that's been not only reviewed by the public, but also reviewed by a legal team for adequacy, which is why it took us a few months to get from end of public review period to tonight. We really spent our time doing that. And I think with that, I'll turn it back to Rick.
Thank you, Kevin. I just glanced into the audience and I saw a few more distinguished guests that are here. Orange County Water District Director, Kelly Rector Sandra Jacobs is here. And former director at South Coast Water District, Colonel Dick Dietmeyer is here as well. So thank you for attending. So I'm going to kick off with a presentation. Don't have the clicker. So anyway, what I'm going to talk about today is how we got here. How we got here to this place of recommending the Doheny Ocean Desal project. A lot of you would say we started back in '03, and that's when we started the slant well progress. Well, I'm here to tell you it started way back. In 1987 through 1992, you remember the drought that hit us. And our entire water world had changed after that. Conservation mandates came up. I was thinking, where was I in 1991? I was back in college. I was sharing a house with 4 other guys, and they took the leadership role and I followed, and we weren't flushing toilets, nor were we washing our clothes very much. So I'm very thankful for the advancements in clothes washers and toilets and shower heads. It made life a lot better. But that's when it all started. And in 1996, Metropolitan Water District issued their first integrated resources plan. And that was a big deal, and they've been updating it all the way through. And in that integrated resources plan, Metropolitan realized that they have a finite source of supplies. And we're going to go through that in the presentation. And they needed additional supplies. So they defined the quantity. It's basically their roadmap on what they need moving forward in terms of State Water Project water, Colorado River water, storage and transfers, local resources such as recycling, desalination, stormwater capture, groundwater treatment, etc., along with a very aggressive conservation program. So that's where it started back in '96. Then after that, we, as you all remember, very recently we had 2 other droughts. One that started back in '07, where we had dry weather plus a regulatory drought, where Judge Wanger made a decision on the Bay Delta. And that was another wake-up call to Metropolitan. And the most recent one as well. The most recent was one of the driest, or it is the driest in the time period that records have been kept. And I think that's over a 100-year span. So all of that has contributed to us looking at new local supplies here. But we didn't start there. Okay. So sorry, I just went on that tangent. So anyway, what we're going to talk about today is, I'm going to kick off with why we're here, and I gave about a quarter of my presentation, so that's good. And Mark Donovan's going to talk about the project itself, the technical details, and Kevin Thomas is going to talk about the EIR. So who's South Coast Water District? What you're looking at is our service area boundary, and it's approximately 8.3 miles. We serve primarily the South Laguna Beach and the city of Dana Point, with small sections of San Clemente and San Juan Capistrano. We have approximately 12,500 water service connections and 35,000 residents. And what also makes us unique is we have over 2 million visitors annually into our service area. South Coast Water District is also the designated operator on behalf of all of these agencies that you see here to operate the Joint Regional Water Supply System. We call it the JRWSS, which consists of 30 miles of transmission mains, 2 reservoirs in San Clemente, that hold 60 million gallons of water. And basically, if you can see it, it's the purple line that starts in Irvine. If you can imagine where the 405 and the Kaiser facility is out there by Sand Canyon, it's slightly north of there is where it starts. And it goes all the way down to Camp Pendleton and state parks in the San Diego County Water Authority area. So those are the three customers we have: state parks, Camp Pendleton, and SoCal Edison through the Songs facility. What you also see is the teal pipeline here. I should point it out right here. And what to pay attention to is where those pipelines intersect. And right there is where we own the property that this desal plant would be built at. And that's important because it's right next to some major transmission facilities. So as I was saying, South Coast Water District didn't start in '03 with this project. We started way back. And so we have been developing a portfolio, a very strong portfolio over the last few decades, to be honest with you. Water use efficiency has been first and foremost with South Coast Water District. During the last drought, we achieved over 30% conservation compared to 2013 water levels. And since then, our customers can be proud of themselves because they sustained conservation over 20%. And we didn't see water demand rebounds as we've seen in other areas. The other thing that you may have heard of is the 20 by 2020 state mandate, 20% conservation by 2020. So for us, the state target is 150 gallons per person per day. Right now, we're averaging 141 gallons per person per day. So we're already meeting that standard. And this also includes water use from the 2 million visitors. We also, one of the statistics that we're the most proud of is we're 2 to 4% water loss in our system. So 2 to 4% may not mean much, but in the industry, it's one of the best in the state. And what that means is we take care of our system. And I give the credit to our water system operators. They have the institutional knowledge and asset management planning to replace the pipes that need replacement, along with normal maintenance there. Or I shouldn't say it's normal, but along with an aggressive maintenance program keeps that water system loss at a very good level. This district has also invested in automated meter reading technology, which is fully implemented in our service area. And we have an aggressive customer service staff that reviews the data on a weekly basis and will contact the customers directly. Hey, you have a leak, please fix it. And during the ordinance, we also mandate the time that they need to fix that in. So our customers are also saving a lot of water. So water use efficiency-wise, very proud. And one more thing is we've embarked on a pilot AMI program. So this uses cellular technology to automate the meter readings. So we invested in a pilot program to replace 3,000 meters, and that was helped out by federal funding, where we received $300,000 to implement this. So we're testing that technology as well. Recycled water, that's the other aspect that we've heavily invested in, and I'm gonna walk through that real briefly. But some of the major stats that you see is South Coast Water puts approximately 1,300 acre feet a year into the coastal treatment plant. And we're currently recycling 70% of those flows, or 900 acre feet a year, currently. And we have plans, and we've put it in our capital improvement plans that you'll see online to maximize our recycled water use to 1,350 actually, acre feet a year in the future. So I'm gonna briefly walk through our extensive recycled water system. The coastal treatment plant is and we move water all the way from the coastal treatment plant down to the harbor. And we didn't do it on our own. We had the help of Prop 84 grants to extend the pipelines to the harbor and to enhance the capacity of our recycled water system. But we started water recycling back in 1982. Our system consists of 15 miles of pipeline, 3 pump stations, and 4.8 million gallons of storage. Our infrastructure master plan that was completed in 2017 identified the projects that we need to maximize recycling to get up to the 1,300 acre feet a year. And that consists of $12.8 million in projects. Currently, I apologize if you're stuck in the traffic at Golden Lantern, but we've been working on a new pipeline out there, and we're just about to wrap up. So by the time July ends, we'll have recycled water flowing back in that pipeline, and that's going to help us expand our capacity and add more customers. So that's $3.5 million and $4 million of the $12.8 million that we've already invested in. The district also is proud of our expert staff, Larry Frigine and his staff, that installs the recycled water meter service lines, and I should give Brian Lynn credit as well, and the meter, and guides the customers through the entire recycled water retrofit process. We also invest in the groundwater recovery facility, which recovers brackish groundwater, production of 700 to 900 acre feet a year. But this is only during normal rainfall years. Some of you may know that we had to shut down this well and this treatment plant from September 2014 to February 2017, so over a 2-year period. So during drought periods, we can use it during emergencies, but we can't use it for a longer term duration. We're also partners on the stormwater capture project. Santa Margarita Water District is taking the lead in phase 1 of the San Juan Watershed Project, which recently went through their environmental approvals. They're the lead agency. Our district committed 20% into this rubber dam technology that would recharge stormwater, and where we could get up to 140 acre feet a year of more drinking water supplies. So when you talk to any water agency, if water metrics weren't confusing enough, we have drinking water supply charts and total water supply charts. So I'm going to walk you through that because it's important to know the distinction. When we're talking about drinking water supplies, that's important when emergencies hit. When emergencies hit, we have to cut down the use of drinking water, and drinking water new supply sources are very valuable during those emergencies, like an earthquake that could cut a transmission main. I'm sorry that this thing is squeaking. So what you're looking at in the pie chart is, on a good hydrologic year, we're able to pull about 12.5% groundwater. The rest of it is metropolitan water that we import from Northern California and the Colorado River Aqueduct. On a bad drought year or a dry year, we don't have any groundwater, and we're 100% dependent on metropolitan. So when you hear that South Coast is 85 to 100% dependent on metropolitan for drinking water supplies, that's what that means. Total water supplies include water use efficiency and recycled water. So I wanted to show you a bar chart that shows you the breakdown, where approximately 60% of our overall water supplies from MET, about 9% groundwater, 20% water use efficiency, which is water conservation over a longer duration, and recycled water is approximately 11% of our overall water supplies. So that's our portfolio today. And I'm going to come back to another slide so you can see there's 2 sources here and 4 sources right here in the total water supplies. So whenever we evaluate a new water supply project, whether it's a water utility on the retail side or a wholesale side, we need to evaluate vulnerabilities, and that's either droughts or emergencies, and the degree of vulnerability. So who does this for us is MET. This is an exhibit that I took straight out of MET's Integrated Resources Plan. So that's the plan that I brought up earlier. That serves as their roadmap for supplies they need to meet all of their demands. So what you see in there in the yellow triangle is the Colorado River Aqueduct. So they rely on the Colorado River Aqueduct, which they receive approximately 1 million acre feet a year. The state water project, they put an average of 1.2 million a year. Well, every year, I wanted to add a side note, MET asks for 2 million acre feet, and they get an allocation. Very recently, we saw them get a 5% allocation. So 5% of 2 million is a number much less than that. So they have to deal with those variabilities in rainfall patterns, but that's an average number that they're using in the long term. So it's roughly 2.1 million acre feet that they have per year. The rest is what they need moving into the years 2040 for their long-term planning. So for conservation, they need roughly 400, it's slightly under 500,000 acre feet more that they need conservation-wise, and it's 460,000 acre feet that they need more in local resources. Per MET's definition, these local resources are recycled water, seawater desalination, stormwater capture, and groundwater cleanup. And coincidentally, this district does all of them except ocean desal. So, and what Met has says directly in their IRP, the integrated plan, is water supply reliability will degrade over time by without these investments, the blue and the purple. By 2040, the region could face mandatory water supply restrictions of up to 80% of the time. So that's 8 out of 10 years that they would be in mandatory restrictions without these investments. So Met has set the stage there, and they actually pay agencies to develop local supplies like desal, and we're applying for that rebate. It's $475 an acre foot for 15 years. So that's drought planning. I didn't want to go too long on that. In South Orange County, as all of you know, it's emergencies. When you have earthquakes, you have fires, and earthquakes you'll see the key vulnerability in South Orange County. So statewide seismic risks that you see here are in the red X's. And those are potential earthquake locations that could severely disrupt the flows from the State Water Project or the Colorado River Aqueduct. We also have local seismic risks, and I want to give the credit to MODOC. They've planned this out and looked at this carefully, but there's 5 fault lines that could disrupt the water that's treated at the Deemer treatment plant in Yorba Linda that serves us down here. There's 2 major transmission mains, and they could be severed, and MODOC and Met has said, MODOC actually in their reliability study has asked us to plan for a minimum of a 60-day outage for this type of scenario. So in terms of emergency supplies, MODOC had done the heavy lifting for the region. You know, as a wholesale provider for the region, they've completed a 2018 and a 2016 Orange County reliability study. And back in '04, they completed a South Orange County reliability study and updated that in 2013. So I'm taking these, basically, these are findings and conclusions that I took from those respective reports. And as I explained, South Orange County is 90% dependent on imported water for drinking water. South Orange County is short of emergency supplies today by 20 to 27.5 million gallons per day. Keep in mind the project you're looking at today is 5 million gallons per day. The single largest risk exposure to South Orange County is an earthquake that could disrupt the State Water Project flows for more than a year. And this was from their South Orange County reliability study, this economic loss impact, and it's $1.7 billion in 2004 dollars. Potential economic loss in South Orange County from an 80% outage for 60 days. So you remember my chart there. We're about 80% reliant on Metropolitan, and we need to plan for a minimum of a 60-day outage. So that could be the economic loss to South Orange County, and this was conducted by the OCBC. It was a study that was concluded back in '04. And the last few points are the San Juan Watershed Project and the Doheny Project provide cost-effective annual supplies and emergency supplies, and these 2 projects make up the core reliability improvement strategy for South Orange County. And again, must be prepared for a minimum 60-day water outage. So I usually don't read from my slides, but these are such key points. I really want to get this right. So after the Orange County Reliability Study was completed in 2016, our board had the wisdom to complete our own water reliability study for South Coast Water District to look at these alternative water supplies and come up with rankings on what would best meet our needs during droughts and our needs during emergencies. And our board also had the wisdom to ask a community public working group to come together, and I put their names on here, and I noticed some of them are in here in the audience. If you don't mind waving your hand as well. But if you don't want to, it's okay too. I don't want to put you on the spot. Bob Oakley, Buck Hill, Hoyen Ip, Jared Mathis, John Thomas, and Roger Buteau. And they put in a lot of time with us. They put in, it was 3 months and 6 meetings, and wait, don't want to get this wrong. 3 months, 6 meetings, and they were long meetings. I was there, and 1 field trip. And they have findings that we put out here, I don't want it to seem like I'm just picking out the good findings here. So I have the findings there in all transparency. Feel free to read them when you have a chance. So, but a finding that really resonated with me is they found that South Coast Water District has a responsibility to their customers to address its system and supply reliability vulnerabilities in an effective and financially feasible manner. Also, the Doheny project would provide water reliability that is under our control, South Coast Water District, and least affected by external events. The study was then concluded looking at their findings and recommendations. We had Dan Rodrigo of CDM Smith who did MODOC study, so we wanted to get a third-party neutral on there. And he concluded that of the water supply options that he evaluated, Doheny ranked the highest for our service area in South Coast. And one of the points I want to bring up is we talked about 60 days of supplies. Right now, South Coast Water District is in a similar position as many other South County agencies. There are some that are in better position. Santa Margarita, who has more storage than we do. South Coast Water District has roughly 11 days of emergency supplies. We have a need for 49 more days. So that's your 60 right there. 49 more days of additional emergency supplies for prudent planning. The Doheny Ocean Desal project, as long as it's running, would provide a continuous supply. Then that would be substantially more than 60 days and potentially that year that we're chasing if there was a large outage on the State Water project. So this is a portfolio. Try to remember what the other one looked like, but there were only 2 slices in that pie. This is what it could look like if the Doheny Ocean Desal project were to go through. And this assumes that we're only taking 3 million gallons per day. So again, another angle for partnership. By taking 3 million gallons a day, you'll see we're 59% dependent on Doheny, 10% on groundwater, 2% on the stormwater capture, that's the San Juan Watershed Project, and our met imported need would be 29%. So what I gather from this, remember the other curve had the red met imported water at 88%. If an emergency hits, when we're asking customers to save, and we're asking them to save 80% or conserve 80%, 88% water, that's difficult. Even if you turned off your sprinklers on your landscape, you would have to do quite a bit more, probably live like me and my college friends back then. And that's 88%. But if you're talking about 29%, that's doable. And that's what we're trying to get to. And that's why we're looking at local supplies here. And this, anybody who has a financial mutual funds, you want to see something like this, a portfolio that you can depend on a lot of different sources during these times of need. So that's going to close up my presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark Donovan. Thank you very much.
You got applause, Rick. Excellent. All right. All right, well, thank you, Rick. I'm going to touch a little bit about Doheny Desal project itself. The Doheny Desal project, it's not a new project. This project has been in the making for quite some time. MODOC first initiated studies over 15 years ago. And it was really during these early studies when different various subsurface technologies were looked at, and the slant well technology was determined to be the most suitable and best for the particular geology in this area. So it was those early studies that really got us to where we were with the slant well technology. In 2008, partners got involved with the extended pumping and pilot test. And then in 2015, South Coast Water District took the reins from MODOC and has gotten us to where we are today on the project. Goals for the project, really first and foremost, is to provide a safe, high quality, locally controlled, and drought-proof water supply, all while protecting the environment. And as Rick mentioned, we also want to further diversify the district's water supply portfolio and also provide emergency backup water supplies. So we believe this project ticks all those boxes quite nicely. In terms of project components, the water intake would be from a subsurface water intake system, specifically slant wells. And then from there, there'd be a raw ocean water pipeline that brings the seawater to the district facility along San Juan Creek, where the desalination facility would be. Also consists of a concentrate brine disposal system, and then a product water storage tank and pumping system. as well as all the support facilities, a small water quality lab, things of that nature. And then also off-site electrical transmission facilities bringing power, most likely from SDG&E, just off of Stonehill Drive. All right, so the subsurface seawater intake system. It's really interesting. MODOC had a lot of foresight back in the day when they decided to investigate the subsurface intake technologies, because where we find ourselves today is this is actually the preferred intake method by the regulators. It's a lot easier to get a project through the regulatory environment that uses subsurface intakes rather than open ocean intake. So MODOC should be applauded for that foresight. And basically the way this works is that it's like a vertical well, but just simply tilted on an angle. And so the well screen is down under the ocean floor with a submersible well pump placed down into the well casing. And the ocean water is simply withdrawn through the ocean floor and into the screened interval and pumped up into the raw water conveyance pipeline. So the slant wells would be fully buried near the beach at Doheny State Beach, and with no visual impacts whatsoever to the sandy beach area. In terms of the potential well pod locations and the raw water pipeline route options that the EIR looked at, so the 5 MGD facility, for seawater desalination, you get about a 50% recovery rate. So for every 5 million gallons of water you want to make potable water, you have to pull up about 10 million gallons of seawater. So to do that, we would need 4 wells, and we predict 3 duty and 1 standby wells. So we envision that 4 wells would be drilled for phase 1, and likely in 2 of these orange dot locations, in 2 of these pod locations. When we first started with the draft EIR, we envisioned that well pod locations could be located anywhere at Doheny State Beach or even down here at Capistrano Beach Park. As over the course of the year, as we were working on finalizing the EIR, it's been interesting. It was a pretty high surf off season, and so storm events caused some damage down there at Capistrano Beach Park. So Kevin's going to get more into this a little bit later, but we're no longer considering slant well pods at Capistrano Beach Park for phase 1. We still want to look at them for possible future visiting in the future, but not for phase 1. In terms of the raw water pipeline, we looked at a couple different options from getting water from the beach to the district facility, the north alignment up Del Obispo, or a south pipeline alignment along Doheny Park Road and Las Vegas Boulevard. And there would be trenchless technologies used to get under San Juan Creek and under railroad crossings and also under PCH bridges as required. So once the water reaches the district site, it gets to the desalination facility. And what you see here is a rendering of what a desal facility could look like at the district property. This rendering is actually it's actually a rendering of the 15 MGD facility. We gave some options for the district in the preliminary design report and the EIR where they could build portions of the facility out a little bit larger to allow for a less expensive expansion in the future. So for example, the building could house 15 million gallons a day worth of RO equipment, but they may choose to only put up to 5 MGD of RO equipment in the building at this time. So there's those types of options that are in the EIR. Another thing we did is we set aside some footprint for alternative energy generation on site. So perhaps the district may look at natural gas fuel cells or natural gas solar turbines to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions or cost for power generation. And also we've carved out space for what we call a R&D pad, research and development, and where the district could effectively partner with universities and industry to advance technology and improve operations. And also this plant is uniquely positioned next to the J.B. Latham wastewater treatment plant. So perhaps someday this could become a hybrid seawater desal direct potable reuse facility. So there's some interesting potential research opportunities there as well. So once the 10 million gallons of day that had been pumped up has been turned into 5 million gallons of drinking water, we also have 5 million gallons a day of twice as salty brine that now needs to be disposed of. So for the proposed project, we would do that by blending that with the San Juan Creek ocean outfall, which goes about 2 miles offshore. This is also the preferred method by regulators and in the California Ocean Plan Desal Amendment. What was interesting, another interesting change between the draft EAR and the final EAR was that we were asked to use a different brine dilution model this time around. And this brine dilution model actually showed that commingling with wastewater is actually not required to meet the Ocean Plan salinity limits, meaning that there's sufficient mixing that the brine from a 5 MGD can dilute within sufficient space per the Ocean Plan requirements where it doesn't need the help of wastewater, basically. So that was a very interesting result from the draft to the final EAR. And that's important with trending, as we start to see trending of lower wastewater flows in the region, and also increased recycling possibilities. We're not dependent on a wastewater treatment flow to help dilute us. We can get away with no wastewater in the future if need be. So that is the major components of the project, and I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Well, good evening. My name is Kevin Thomas with Kimley Horn. I'm just going to walk through the environmental impact report process. It'll be brief, so don't fear. I think between Rick's introduction and what Mark covered, they actually covered a lot of the environmental topics that we have been addressing throughout the last few years. As Rick indicated, this is an important milestone for the project tonight. We've released the draft ER in June 6th of this past year, 2018, that had a 60-day public review period, which is more than required by CEQA. So the public review period ended August 6, 2018. During that period, also not required, but just another indication of the district really trying to engage the public. We had a public comment meeting on June 26, just additional opportunity to receive public input on the EIR. And then as Rick indicated tonight, the Board of Directors will be considering the final EIR, then considering a resolution as to whether or not to approve the project after having an opportunity to receive public comment. And I believe we have a court reporter here that is also going to be taking, yes, she's here, thank you. So we'll be recording your comments as well, and the board will be listening to your comments during the public testimony period. So during the public review period, again, about a 2-month period, we received over 70 comments. A majority of those were web comments. The district allowed interested parties to submit comments online, just as a courtesy. So we've got about 32 of those comments were online. We had 2 federal agency comments, 7 state agency comments, 10 local, 7 different organizations submitted comment letters. During that June 26th public meeting, we had 6 comments that were received, and then 10 written public comment letters. So what we've been doing since last August is working on preparing the final environmental impact report. The district really has, I believe, went to extraordinary effort to seriously engage the comments and sometimes meet directly with stakeholders, make sure we understood the issues. In some cases, as Rick indicated or Mark indicated, we felt that in order to respond to some of the comments we received, we needed to do some technical clarifications to some of the draft ER appendices. So the final environmental impact report included some technical clarifications to the coastal hazards model, the brine discharge model that Mark summarized that actually showed favorable results compared to what the draft ER had assumed. We did some supplemental groundwater modeling just to study the project further, which just re-amplified the conclusions in the draft ER. We updated the local hazard and drainage analysis primarily to mirror the coastal hazards modeling that was updated, and that was due to Coastal Commission sea level rise guidance that came out right about when our draft ER was published. So, of course, when the Coastal Commission commented, they asked us to please update the model, which we did. And it really didn't change the conclusions significance-wise in the draft ER. And then we did some marine biology clarifications just to address the brine discharge modeling and the groundwater modeling. And all of that is contained in the final ER. During that process, again, over the last, whatever that's been, 9 months, we've been engaging with stakeholders. As part of that process, when we responded to the comments, there are, in a few cases, we made technical corrections to the draft ER That's in section 3 of the final ER. Those are draft ER errata. So those are minor technical corrections and clarifications to the draft ER. Mark did comment, and I'll highlight this in the next slide again, a couple changes from the draft ER. For the board action tonight, should the board consider approving the project, it would only be for slant wells at Doheny State Beach, not Capistrano Beach, due to coastal hazard concerns. And then as Mark indicated, we eliminated one of the mitigation measures because we no longer need the commingled brine with the wastewater outfall in order to meet ocean plan. And that was the result of the updated brine discharge modeling that was done at the request of the regional board. So all of that was pulled together into the final environmental impact report that was released to the public on June 17, a notice of availability, which was done pursuant to CEQA in advance of this meeting tonight. Just to briefly walk through the final ER findings, essentially reaffirmed what the draft ER concluded, that the local project, which would be a ocean desalination facility of up to 5 MGD, the phase 1 project, would not have any unavoidable significant environmental impacts. So any potential impacts could be fully mitigated. We also made it clear, both in the draft ER and the final ER and in the board resolution tonight, that should the district or any other entity pursue a regional project, that would have to have separate environmental review, because our project-specific environmental document before the board tonight is just for the phase 1 local project. In total, we have approximately 40 mitigation measures that have been identified to avoid or minimize potential impacts, and that's in addition to the project design features that are listed in the ER. I would also like to note, as we've been working on the final ER, we did just, I believe within the last day or so, receive written communication from 2 of the commenting parties. We received a letter from CURE, and they indicated that they are satisfied with our response to their comments, and that letter is part of the record. We also received a written communication from Caltrans that they found our responses to be adequate to address their concerns. Just wanted to note that for the record. So just to maybe to restate what it was, I think, already covered, but it's an important distinction. So that the draft environmental impact report did address the full range of potential slant well options. Mark covered this, but they addressed slant wells at Doheny State Beach and Capistrano Beach Park. This is noted in the staff report. And as Mark summarized, because of some winter surf conditions that was experienced last fall, and in talking to Orange County Parks, it became evident that the coastal hazard constraint at that location would make that not a really preferable site right now. So the action before the board, for consideration of the phase 1 local project, would only be for slant wells at Doheny State Beach. And because of that, some of the mitigation measures in the draft ER dropped out. Those that were only pertaining to Capistrano Beach Park are not applicable, with the wells being at Doheny State Beach. Also, one change from the draft ER that I believe Rick mentioned, it's in the staff report and the resolution. The draft ER indicated a greenhouse gas mitigation plan to essentially offset the additional greenhouse gas emissions from the project, comparing the emissions to what would occur under a water importation portfolio that the district currently has. That's a net neutral greenhouse gas mitigation plan. That's in the draft ER. In discussions with stakeholders and looking at some of the responses to the comments, there was a request for the district to consider 100% carbon neutral, which essentially would mean even though the electricity from providers is already required to be mitigated to achieve the state's climate change goals, the 100% carbon neutral project would offset 100% of the emissions of the project. So it's an additional level of offset. It's beyond what's required for CEQA, but it's a requirement that other projects have had, and so we wanted to give the district that option to consider that tonight. So in summary, just to summarize the staff report that's been presented to the board, following public comment, which will come next, the board will consider the following actions. First, the board will consider whether or not to certify the final environmental impact report as adequate under CEQA. The board would then direct staff as to which of the two greenhouse gas reduction options should be pursued. The board would adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And if and only if those three actions are taken, the EIR is certified, the mitigation monitoring and reporting plans adopted, and written findings are made, then the district, as part of adopting resolution number 29-1819, could then approve the project described in the final EIR as the Doheny Ocean Desalination Project, a phase 1 local project up to 5 MGD. As part of that resolution, that would also direct district staff to proceed with development of the project, including submitting and processing permit applications. However, as Rick summarized, section 11 of that resolution indicates a number of conditions that would have to be met prior to the project actually commencing construction, all of which would be under the discretion of the board in the future. And then finally, the staff report and resolution would include direction to district staff to return regularly to the board for updates. And with that, that concludes staff's presentation.
Well, at this time, before we start calling names and going into the public hearing, we'll take about a 7-minute break. We've been sitting for an hour and 3 minutes, so I think everybody needs to move around for just a little bit. So we want to promptly start at 7:10. So, and at that time, Jody will call the first three folks to the to get in line by the podium. Thank you. If we could please get going, appreciate it.
Do you want to go with me to meet with my fire
Are you gonna? You're announcing? Oh,
Can you make it? Wait a minute, I'm hung up on a table leg.
if we can get everybody to please, please. Thank you. We do have one other distinguished gentleman with us today from from Assemblywoman Petrie Norris's, and that's Nathan Siri. Could you raise your hand? Thank you for being here this afternoon. Appreciate it. Well, at this time, I'm going to ask our clerk of the board to come up and identify the first three speakers, and then we'll just move right along after that. Thank you.
The first three speakers will be Ernesto Medrano, Douglas Mangione, and followed by Eric Jessen.
So if you want to come up and just, oh, there you go. There you go, right? You want to be in the center, Jody? Or right over here in the center? And the other three can line up on the chairs right in front row there if you'd like. You state your name and address.
My name is Ernesto Medrano, and I reside at 2100 East Catella Avenue in Anaheim, California. And I represent the Los Angeles and Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council. It's comprised of about 140,000 hardworking men and women in both counties, of which many of them reside here in the community. We represent about 15 trades, and we're here to urge the staff, the board, to approve the staff recommendation. It looks like there's a very thorough, very open process to this environmental impact report. Our members that are very skilled, very trained with our apprenticeship, with our journey level folks, this is the kind of projects that they built. They built the desalination plant down in Carlsbad a few years back. We got it done, and they're all pumping water all the way up to North San Diego County. A lot of the programs that we do is many young men and women are not going to go to college. And here they have a choice, they have an option to be able to enter a career pathway, take the other 4-year degree, as we call it, the apprenticeship, and turn out journey level and make a middle-class income. And these are the kind of projects that give those opportunities to the young men and women in these communities. The other thing that we do also is we provide direct entry into veterans through our Helmets to Hardheads program. So we want to applaud you, and we're hopeful that this goes through all the way so we can have the opportunities to work here. We pride ourselves in getting the work done in the least amount of time with the least amount of workers and be the most efficient and with the highest safety standards. So again, I just want to urge you to move this process forward so we could see and have an opportunity to work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Very next speaker.
Good evening, Doug Mangione. I reside at 26812 Vista Del Mar, Capistrano Beach. I also represent the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and I'm going to be very brief. I also want to commend you on putting what looks like a very responsible product that's going to provide adequate water to the residents while protecting the local ocean environment, which we all move down here and love to use, play, and watch. So thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Chair of the South Laguna Water and Sewer Committee. I want to compliment those who crafted the EIR and resolution before you tonight, because they're really some of the best documents I've ever seen before a decision-making body. Over the past years, the district has not only conducted, the public workshops, but taken other inclusive steps to get us to this point. Past and present board members, including all of yourselves, have provided courageous leadership aimed at fulfilling the vision of another dependable local water supply, which I believe will make the Dana Laguna area the envy of Orange County when the next future inevitable droughts strike. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Next, Jody, you want to call out the next three speakers?
The next three speakers will be Mandy Sackett, Carl Seckel, and Ray Heimstra.
Good evening, board members. My name is Mandy Sackett with the Surfrider Foundation. Surfrider appreciates the South Coast Water District, the efforts for the South Coast Water District to design the proposed Doheny desalination plant in accordance with the California Ocean Plan requirements. We want to applaud the district for conducting a proper subsurface feasibility analysis as required by the Ocean Plan. And while not in opposition to desalination in concept, Surfrider supports maximization of conservation and water recycling options before considering desalination. The California legislature recently mandated a per capita water use of maximum of 50 gallons per day by 2030, and the district's average is 94.4 gallons per day per capita. So there's clearly a little bit of work to do here. It's not clear if the Orange County Water Reliability Study uses that mandate in its predicted water supply needs for South Orange County, and we hope that the district will take these mandates into account, especially when considering future expansion of the plant. I'd like to strongly urge the board to select option 2 for a 100% carbon neutral plant. Desalination plants are highly energy intensive, and anything other than 100% neutrality would be wholly irresponsible, especially given our state's mandate for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And importantly, an agreement between the Department of Water Resources and the Metropolitan Water District prohibits desalination projects from reducing MWD's state water project entitlements. So MWD's rights to imported water are laid out in an agreement that is valid until 2035. And so a one-to-one reduction in greenhouse gas emissions would be impossible. The Coastal Commission has required the Poseidon-Carlsbad plant to offset 100% of their emissions. And we do also appreciate the district's choice to reduce exposure to coastal hazards with their planning here. And while the coastal hazards analysis for the final EIR was thorough, it failed to consider an extreme sea level rise scenario over the life of the proposed plant. The state has directed all critical infrastructure projects to consider and design to withstand a potential extreme scenario. And so we're just concerned from Surfrider's perspective about the potential for a need for future shoreline armoring here, especially given the impacts that seawalls have to beach erosion and surf. And the Coastal Act does not allow for future shoreline armoring for any new development within the coastal zone, and we hope that this plant will be designed in a way to avoid any of those potential impacts. And finally, I just want to ask one clarifying question on public access impacts. The drilling of the slant wall is expected to take place over 2 6-month periods, and hoping that you can confirm whether or not beach use, surfing, and other activities in the water at Doheny will be able to take place over that time period. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, board members, and it's nice being here tonight. Carl Seckel from Municipal Water District of Orange County. I've been a partner and associated with this project for many years, so I want to thank you all for picking it up and moving it forward from the early work that MODOC did, so congratulations on that. Congrats on your diligence and your stamina in this process. It's been a long road. As I sat in the audience listening tonight, I was reminded of a couple of things that I thought might be important that I just wanted to remind you about. The first, as your general manager spoke about what this project could do for the area, we hear more and more often about the drought protection it would provide, but we don't always hear, and then he did a nice job tonight, but just wanted to remind you, we have an emergency need that is here today. It's been identified in South Orange County, and part of this process, I think, is you all are helping to address that. And I know you all understand that, but for the audience, I just wanted to reiterate that. The other comment I heard tonight is that the decision before you right now has to do with simple approval of the EIR, and it's not a simple process, but it could be a simple motion and vote tonight. And that doesn't necessarily commit you to moving forward with it, but it is a very important step in the permitting process, and I think it moves the project forward and moves the agency forward on this path. So I would urge you to move in that direction tonight, and congratulations on all the work efforts and the diligence you put in to date. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, I'm Ray Heimstra with Orange County Coastkeeper. I just want to express our support for the design of the proposed project. The project meets all of the statewide desalination policies by being located where a need is present, designed for the actual need in the area, using subsurface intakes, commingling the brine. This, if you're going to do desal, this is the way to do it right. So I know there's the decision's going to be made later as to whether you do it, but if you're going to do it, this is the way it should be done in Orange County. And thank you for having an open public process and really doing your homework and coming up with an appropriate design. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next three speakers are Bob Oakley, Harold Breen, and Megan Schneider.
Good evening, board members. I won't be quite so eloquent as all the previous speakers. I commend them. But I'd like to commend the board and South Coast Water District staff on their full transparency all along the way. You included public comments. You included a working group, which I was pleased to be a part of. And even though I thought I knew quite a bit about desalination, I learned a lot. And I learned a lot about what we need here in South County. And this is the answer, so I would urge a yes vote on this resolution. I just want to mention it was good news to hear about the commingling situation, that it wasn't really necessary. And I don't know if you're aware, but in Avalon, Catalina, Southern California Edison has maintained a desalination plant for decades, and using the same type of technology. The wells are vertical along the shore, but they have a surface outfall, and that outfall mixes very, very quickly, and that's, you can prove that by looking at the Garibaldi swimming right off the shore. So I was privileged to give tours of that facility for many, many years. So I thank you. I hope that we go forward this project. That's going to be great for South Orange County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, board members. My name is Harold Breen. I'm a resident of Capistrano Beach. My wife is here with me tonight. We are homeowners. My family bought a little house back here when I was like 7 years old, and came down here and used the beach when I was a little boy, and even tried surfing in Doheny and fell down a lot of times. But now it seems like California is the major stalwart of responding to climate change. We lead the nation in a lot of areas. We had to fight even again to preserve our strong standards for all new automobiles being manufactured and sold in California. It's a big issue. It's going to be a big issue in the coming 2020 presidential and congressional elections. But I had the benefit of talking with Mark Donovan, who spoke earlier to the board. He and I went over some of the dollar figures for what the project is going to cost in terms of electricity. And daily costs are $10,137. Per month charges are $308,000 in 1 month. Annual amounts are going to be $3.7 million, $3,700,000. It seems to me that the board needs to take a serious look at solar panels to integrate into its energy usage regimen over the next 10 years, possibly 15, 20 years. This board is going to be the board that's going to make the decision as to how this energy mix is going to develop. Right out there in that back window, you can see the mountains up there. A lot of that is public land. Down right here in the valley, right next to where you're going to build the project, you've got a lot of private land and public land along the freeway, heading up into the cliff areas above Laguna Niguel, San Juan Capistrano, and all the way towards Mission Viejo. I think it's a stretch there of 4 miles. We all see that as we're driving up and down the freeway between here and Crown Valley.
Thank you. We're out of
Thank you.
time. Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to be here. For those of you in the audience who don't know me, my name is Megan U. Schneider, and I live on 25522 Purple Sage Lane in San Juan Capistrano. I'm a proud South Coast Water District sewer customer and a proud customer of San Juan Capistrano Water, soon to be Santa Margarita Water District. And I've been excited to follow this project for quite some time. I'm a chemical engineer by education with a focus on environmental engineering. Have my bachelor's and master's degree in engineering. I'm a licensed civil engineer, and I've been able to participate in this process as a resident, as an engineer, and now as a representative of the Municipal Water District of Orange County. And it's been fascinating to watch this process because you guys have kept it so open and transparent, and it's been such an opportunity for collaboration. And I want to commend you guys on the opportunities you have taken and involved the public. And this has now become a project that not only the water community has embraced, but that the public has embraced. And, you know, I have to admit, I was very skeptical at first because being an engineer, we're ultra conservative. We're as conservative as they come. And so my first question was, why don't we do recycled water? You know, that's the lowest hanging fruit. And you guys really took all of that into consideration, delved deep into it, and really investigated it, and then proved to us all that this is the most cost-efficient and locally reliable opportunity that we have. And I think it's incredible that you guys have not only done that, but partnered with Santa Margarita Water District on integrating the Doheny Desal project into phase 4 of the San Juan Watershed project. So it shows a lot of foresight. It shows investment into our future, because I got baptized at Doheny Beach. My husband grew up surfing here, and his father grew up surfing here. And so this is a community and a beach that's very near and dear to us. And the cost of not investing in our reliability is far more than any cost we're going to invest in today. And as we've shown, that the numbers are amazing for a desal project here in South County, where we don't have a bowl-shaped aquifer for long-term groundwater storage, where we don't have a robust groundwater system that has high-quality water, where we don't have a lot of local supply. We've been able to develop a project that's regional, that's collaborative, and cost-efficient. And so I commend you all, and I encourage you to take this next step, because I've been able to participate in projects from the EIR phase, the planning phase, the design phase, all the way to construction. And the way you have done this in such a measured and thoughtful way has been absolutely incredible and inspiring. And I'm so just excited to see this progress. And I'm here with you guys. I've participated in so many of your public workshops. I'm one of those people who will spend time away from my husband to participate. And so I really encourage you to move this project forward for this next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speakers, we need to announce 3 more, or Jody?
The next 3 speakers are Tony Nelson, Marcus Langer, and Sandra Jacobs.
Good evening, Tony Nelson, Capistrano Beach. Is this high enough for me? I'm taller than most.
It's working well, thank you.
Okay. So I'm speaking not as any kind of expert. I'm not an engineer. I don't know very much about water other than I like to drink it and bathe in it. I'm speaking more from the perspective of residents, and particularly as a Capistrano Beach resident. And I'm very delighted to hear that you are not going to be putting slant wells on Capistrano Beach, because we only have about 2 inches left of Capistrano Beach. But one thing that I would like to encourage you to look at is the coastal hazard along the rest of the bay, Capistrano Bay, we're already seeing that the pathway between Capistrano Beach and Doheny is crumbling. There's no, the Coastal Commission did not allow us to put sandbags or anything in there, so that pathway that we call hole in the fence is going to disappear, and that's really kind of scary. And we also noticed that the east parking lot at Doheny Beach is also crumbling. We're losing some of the parking spots. It's been closed for months down there. So I don't want you to think that taking it away from Capistrano Beach solves the problem, because we have the same coastal erosion everywhere, and Doheny will be impacted as well. And then the other two things I wanted to mention, you've spent a lot of time on this, and I appreciate the time that you've spent with me personally on this. And there's a lot more that I understand, but I'm still nervous as a ratepayer about two things. The first is the reliability of the slant well. Nobody can tell me about another place where you have slant wells that have been operating for a long time, where we know that they really can produce at the level that you're anticipating, this 5 million gallons a day, and that it can do so reliably without breaking down. I did hear that there's something in Monterey, there's some kind of slant well sample there, or whatever, a test well, and it seems to be working, but it's not the same as a long-term test, and so I'm kind of worried about that. And that leads me to my third concern, which is the fiscal concern. We're a very small city. We only have 36,000 people here in our rate district, and you're asking us to take on about $100 million in debt. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried about that as a ratepayer. I'm worried about it as a CPA myself. And I want to make sure that whether you pass this tonight or not, that when you go forward, you're very careful about the financial implications here. Want to make sure that you have lots of margin, that you can handle the debt and keep paying the debt, even if the slant wells break down, even if construction goes into an overrun. If you end up, instead of getting 5 million gallons a day, you go, whoops, we made a mistake, we're only going to get 3 million. What does that do to your financial picture?
Thank you,
So I hope
Tony.
look at that. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Marcus Langer. As some of you know, I actually run for the Water District and was quite openly against the desal plant. I've read the EIR, and it's cherry-picking data to an extreme uncomfortable event. First of all, you guys need to look at United Nations study in January who says that the brine is in fact toxic. It does not mix, okay? As a scientist for 30 years, the problem, I heard a lot about models. The problem with models is if you take state-of-the-art fluid modeling software for airplanes and you put in all the parameters for Bumblebee, it will tell you the Bumblebee can't fly. So models are exactly that. They're guesswork. Now, you don't have the data. We know that that technology is experimental, period. It's not established. It's not emerging. It's experimental. On top of it, strangely enough, the guy that invented it is also your consultant that produces all the data. That's a conflict of interest that's unbelievable. Also, furthermore, I'm very involved in water, and direct potable reuse is already used and legal in Arizona, Texas, and Oregon, and will be here in 2 years, making this whole thing obsolete. So you guys need to look really at the arrival time of the direct potable reuse. It's happening faster than we thought. Last time we kind of talked about it, but it's coming faster. Furthermore, do some more homework. This is cherry-picked, the data's skewed. I'm not buying it by any means. It's not supported by facts, as I see it. And please, don't go there. We can't afford it. We don't need it. And by the time you're going to build it, it's obsolete. Don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you, President Green and members of the board and staff. I'm Sandra Jacobs, and I'm president of the Santa Margarita Water District. We're located just north of here, north of South Coast Water District, and we've partnered with you on many projects in the past. There's 2 points I'd like to make tonight. Santa Margarita Water District's water supply portfolio includes imported water, recycled water, storm and urban capture, conservation, and desalinization partnership. We recently entered into 2 non-binding MOUs for desal, and we're excited that South Coast Water District has come this far on a very important project. And I look forward to a 3rd MOU. The second point I'd like to make is the EIR that you're considering tonight. When I'm not serving in my water district role, I write environmental impact reports and negative declarations under CEQA, as well as environmental impact statements under NEPA. This EIR process has been long and arduous, and I support your approval of this document tonight. Then on to the Coastal Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
The last 2 speakers are Steve Carpenter and Rob Hunter.
Good evening, board members, staff. My name is Stephen Carpenter. I'm a resident of Capistrano Beach for close to 60 years, living out of the area during my time in the service. My father used to be a member of the Capistrano Beach Water District. I am so happy to see where we are today. It's been a long time. We need to move forward. We are a vulnerable community here, and the vulnerability we have is, where do we get our water? It was brought up tonight about problems with earthquakes, problems with a lot of areas, drought, which we all know droughts are going to continue. They're not going to go away. We live in an area, if it wasn't for the water being pumped in over the Sierra Nevadas, this would all be desert. If you look back through history, I am in support of this. I hope you move forward with this for a positive flow, that we can sit there and know that we can be safe, knowing that we can have water available, potable water here. There are other ways that we can bring in other water. Recycling, people hate to hear it, of sewage. It's done in the military. It's been done for decades. It's potable water. It can be done. What I'm really happy to also see is in the basin that was brought up in the one slide, is bringing in rubber inflatable dams that can come in to retake this water, back it up, and put it into the groundwater. My father was one of the leaders for the groundwater recovery before anybody was ever here. And as a Capistrano Beach at the water district where he was at, that was one of the things that he wanted to put in here. So we can bring in with other wells and other storage and other stuff, which can add to it, so we can hopefully future-proof this. So I hope you go with a positive vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. I'm Rob Hunter. I'm the General Manager of Municipal Water District of Orange County. And while we have 4 people here tonight, there were many more who wanted to come, and I bring you greetings from our former director, Susan Hinman, who is in Montana at this point. Otherwise, she, I believe, sets the record for attending meetings in South County. I want to congratulate you, first of all. I am obviously not a spring chicken. I have spent my entire career on the environmental engineering side on projects, and I have never been to a EIR, EIS hearing that has been as positive as this one. So I congratulate you for the work you did, both as a board and staff. But I also want to congratulate you on some of the background work that got you to this point. You hear, well, we need to do conservation first. And I want to congratulate this utility for what they've done over the years in conservation. You reached your 2020 goals in 2016. When the governor issued the executive order of mandatory reduction, your goal was 24% and you achieved 30%. When that went to a stress test of 10% reduction, you achieved 26% reduction. Post-drought, you are still at 23% reduction. When people talk about conservation, you have done conservation, and you've looked at the options of what you need to have a reliable water system, not only from a supply, but from the system standpoint for emergencies. Just to answer a question from earlier, yes, we did look at the 55 gallon per capita per day requirement, and I don't have your number, but I'm willing to bet you're under that number right now. On the water loss program, you are our biggest participant in the shared service water loss program we do, not only from doing the calculations up front, the assessment, but doing the actual field work on water loss and the meter testing. You are setting the example, and your performance in terms of 2 to 4% water loss is just exceptional. You should be praised for that. Finally, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank you for bringing this project to this next phase. There's a lot of work that's ahead. When you approve this EIR tonight, and when you decide to move forward to the project, I don't want to say the work's just begun, but there is a tremendous amount of work that's coming up. You are not making a decision that you're going to do this project. You're making a decision that you'll keep advancing it to make it the proper decision. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers? No. Okay, thank you. Well, then we will close the public hearing, and we'll look to the board for some further discussion. And I will look to my colleagues wishing to start off. Do you want to take a shot, Dennis?
Yes, thank you, Bill, and thanks to all those who came and who spoke here tonight. As Mr. Hunter pointed out, there is still a long way to go, and we have many steps that we will be looking to take from this point forward. I have some concerns. Mr. Kidman admonished the board about these concerns for tonight are the environmental concerns that we really want to be talking about. But I'd like to talk about all the concerns, because you as the members of the public and as our customers here should know about all of the concerns and not just the environmental ones. I do share concerns about the slant wells because of the maturity of that particular endeavor. We don't have a long history there. And the slant wells are mission critical to this project. And if they don't work, the project doesn't work. And so we need to proceed cautiously and deliberately. And we should have a backup plan in the event that the slant wells do not perform as we expect them to. Perhaps if another project like the Monterey project got ahead of us and put their slant wells in and had 2 to 3 or 4 years of successful production, and we found out that they don't need to be rehabilitated every 18 months, that you can go 5 years before you need to rehabilitate them, that gives real operating parameters that can be dealt with. And so it helps to establish the costs that the project would ultimately have to bear. We don't have partners in the project at this time, and I think we need partners in this project. We certainly are open to partners, and I'm very delighted to hear Director Jacobs talk about the possibility of partnerships. And we've talked with others in the South County area to try to enlist their support to come aboard with this project. There is a significant regulatory gauntlet that we will have to go through in order to achieve success with this project. And there's a lot of risk involved in that regulatory gauntlet, and it continues. I almost called it regulatory purgatory, because you don't know from day to day what the new item is going to be that could ultimately cost your project a significant amount of time or money or both, or even success. And so we need to be very mindful as we move forward that we have this very strong regulatory, very high regulatory hurdles that we'll have to cross, and many of them. This project has been talked about by Mr. Seckel and others as having a regional benefit, and the staff today talked about it, providing regional reliability. And I think it's important that we look at that regional reliability and then ask ourselves the question, if it is a regional asset, should South Coast be the only one paying the bill for it? And again, that gets back to the partners. We need those partners to come aboard because those partners will help to defray some of the expenses of this regional asset. And I think that would be a very good move. We've talked about the diversification of the supply portfolio, and I think it's important to recognize that if this project were to proceed at a 5 MGD level for South Coast Water District alone, that would mean replacing 100% of the Met water that we now get with 100% of ocean desalination water. To me, that's not diversification. That's just a one-to-one replacement. And so we need to be careful in terms of our future water planning that we continue to look for diversification. We continue to look for more opportunities to expand our recycle system. Mr. Shintok talked about moving that system up to 1,350 acre feet per year. But there has never been any water that has been recycled from the J.B. Latham wastewater treatment plant. There is an opportunity in the future as the J.B. Latham treatment plant undergoes rehabilitation to correct that problem and to actually gain some recycled water at J.B. Latham and perhaps further expand not only South Coast Water District's recycled water opportunities, but provide some of that water for our neighboring agencies who have great opportunity for getting into the recycled water business. The city of San Juan Capistrano, namely, they've had a very robust program that has been kind of put on the shelf for lack of funding. But they're new partners in water with the Santa Margarita Water District. Perhaps that can be brought off the shelf now and some additional recycled water can be brought about. We've also talked about reliability tonight. And I want to remind everyone that the reliability of this project is fully dependent upon electricity. And so if we have a cataclysmic event here that takes down the water lines and causes severe disruption of that kind, or something like happened in Puerto Rico and takes out the electric grid, then this project is no more reliable than the whatever amount of power, standby power that we might have to run it. Mr. Harris talked about the power costs for this project, and I'm sure that he's looked into how much power this project takes. It takes 3.5 megawatts of power. Now, that's just a number to most of you, but let me put it this way. 3.5 megawatts is 1/3 of the amount of power used to power the entire city of Dana Point. So it's not a trivial amount of power. And to have standby generators or batteries or solar or any other power source, if that's going to be part of the project, and if the reliability is really going to become an issue, then we need to factor that into the project. And to my knowledge, I don't think we've really come to a decision about whether we're going to buy standby power at that quantity or at that cost. So, not related to environmental is concerns about cost. And I know we're not going to talk about cost, and that's not part of what we're here to think about tonight, but it is part of what this board needs to undertake. And that is a very serious look at the cost of this project. And whatever the total number is, it's really the affordability of this project to the citizens and the ratepayers that we serve. And we need to be very careful that we don't undertake, as Ms. Nelson said, a project that we just simply cannot afford because we think it's cool and it hits all the right markers. It's really got to be financially sound investment in utility infrastructure. Part of making it a sound investment will be potentially bringing those partners on board who can help to underwrite some of the costs for the project. So that's kind of summary of what my thoughts are about this particular project. Thank you for your attention, and I'd like to hear from my fellow board members about their thoughts and ideas on this project.
We'll just move down the line. Director Rayfield, do you want to?
Not sure if this mic is working, but I'll borrow Rick's. I promise to give it back. I'd really like to begin by thanking everyone who's here tonight and for the thoughtful and helpful comments we've received. I also want to thank everybody on our staff and the consultants for really a first-rate job in putting the draft EIR together. And for the thoughtful responses to the questions, concerns, ideas that were raised in the public comment period. Really an outstanding job. I think I can totally accept the work that has been done as honest, thorough, and addressing the public concerns. I'd like to thank Mr. Green. Harold?
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes. Green.
Yes, yeah.
With the D.
Oh, Green, I'm sorry. We are really seriously concerned about alternative energy sources, renewable energy sources, and environmentally, if not renewable, environmentally friendly. So we're looking not only at solar, we're also looking at fuel cells and anything else that makes sense economically. As Dennis pointed out, our power bill is huge, half the operating cost of a typical desal plant. So to the extent we can reduce that power bill, it's a real cost savings. Having said all that and appreciating the comments that Dennis made, I think the work done by the staff on the EIR is not only sufficient to approve that work, but almost mandates approval of it. It is so thorough and accurate and well done. So I'm prepared to move forward on that this evening. Thank you.
Director Urkeneff, please.
Well, I'm going to pass out more thank yous, again, to our staff, to our consultants, and effectively to our partners who helped start this project in MODOC. Having toured the slant well when it ran for approximately 2 years, Carl, and looking at the technology and looking at where we as a state are going to be in the future, our water supplies are shrinking. In fact, they're oversubscribed. So you can talk about drought all you want, but when you look at oversubscription of supply that our forefathers thought were, say, in the Colorado River, they thought there was more water going to be there. And then you look at environmental concerns with climate change and the unpredictability of where our weather's going, and the majority of California's supply being just that, dependent on weather and dependent long-term weather patterns. You know, those are things that concern me. And having grown up in this town, I moved here in 1972 when I was just a wee child, and attended, I think I can see my grade school up on there, R.H. Dana, and have lived here my whole life and plan to continue to live here. Having come to this seat from the environmental community, it's very encouraging to see the Surfrider Foundation, the Coast Keeper, address to me the concerns of the environment, knowing those organizations take binders like this and they put their staff scientists on them and they dig through every page of this. And I can tell you, going through this was a pretty daunting task. And you know, the technical nature of a lot of the comments that were submitted took up hours and hours and hours of time. But I believe that if there was a fatal flaw in the environmental component, and that's what we're talking about here tonight, I think it would be glaringly obvious. As our last speaker, Rob Hunter, the general manager of the Municipal Water District of Orange County, said there's a lot of work to go. So if there's an approval tonight, it's by no means a green light to, you know, put a shovel in the ground over here and get this going. So I think that in moving forward, taking into account any of the comments that were received here today, I would hope that our consultants and our staff could clear up any of the comments that were here, if those are to be considered fatal flaws. I don't think that they are. And again, I just you know, really appreciate every organization, every person that put in comments. I did go through them. I went through our responses, and I didn't find anything that was so glaring that would be a fatal flaw at this point. With regard to the energy, I've been a strong supporter and opponent of community choice energy. I've had multiple meetings with the mayor of Dana Point, Joe Miller, with our city manager, Mark Denny, with staff in San Clemente. And when you look at the future of energy in the state of California, South Orange County and Orange County, we're woefully behind where the state is going to move to and the mandates that our state are going to be requiring. And unfortunately, I'm not on the committee for energy for this project. I know two of my colleagues are, so I don't really get to get behind the curtain on all the exciting opportunities that could be coming our way as far as all the alternative energy that is going to be potentially considered for this project. But you know, I would be under I would be supportive of being 100% carbon neutral on this project. I know that operationally it may be a little bit more expensive, but I believe that for our environment it's the right thing to do, and I think that we should fully consider that with the approval tonight. I'll leave that at my comments.
Thank you. Director Erdman, please.
At the beginning of the night, the district council went over the charge to the board members here. He spoke about that we were to evaluate whether the EIR adequately answered the questions from the public and whether the conclusions of the EIR were supported by substantial evidence. And for most of us on the board who are engineers, it's tough not to put in your own opinions for that. He talked about making sure the EIR showed their homework. Staff and the consultants have put in a tremendous effort for this EIR over the past several months. And I believe right now it would be a disservice to those efforts for me to vote on this project without having the adequate time to review it. It's only been out 10 days, and I mean, you can look at it here. It's definitely not a Stephen King novel. It's not one you can't put down. It's one you can't wait to put down. I do believe in this project, but at this time, I'm going to abstain from voting to approve until I've had time to finish reviewing the EIR document.
Well, thank you. It's always nice to be last, because I think most of the good stuff has already been said, but I just can't leave a lot of it unsaid. But I do want to, first of all, I want to thank all the audience for being here this evening. it's valuable to hear the input from the community. That's because we're elected by you, and we want to do we're trying to be the heartbeat of the community, so we want to do the right job for you. So we're looking out. We look at the environmental document, which is tremendously a lot of effort, and just watching the consultant team. I just commend all of you for doing a terrific job. Thank you for that. I had a question or two, though, when it comes to, I know we're not talking about funding, but I think this is critical. One comment, it might be for Kevin, and that would be, we're doing a CEQA document here. And if we were to pursue, and we are pursuing funding, we're going to get state grants, we're looking at federal grants, and I just want to be clear in my mind that our document will be eligible for the federal funding, which we have. NEPA is usually the document. Whether if we can do our CEQA document or a final EIR, or do we just do an EA to get this through the Bureau? Just some clarification for my.
Certainly. I will give it an initial response, and if you'd like to drill down, no pun intended, a little deeper. So for the
vertical or slant?
Slant, well, clearly. So for the SRF loan process, the CEQA Plus process, we've coordinated very closely with the State of California staff. Although it is an environmental impact report, there's a section in the introduction of the document that expressly states its intent to meet the CEQA Plus requirements for SRF loans. So we've gone through, and the document addresses all the different federal statutes and regulations, the federal cross-cutter regulations, as they call them, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and Endangered Species Act. So I believe that our document will meet that intent. The SRF process has a verification element to that, so we'll need to submit documentation, which we already have, made an initial submittal. That may require some further clarification, but I believe the EIR will substantially suffice. In terms of federal funding, such as potentially from the Bureau of Reclamation, that is a NEPA process. It's separate from CEQA, so the Bureau or any other federal agency, they would have to go through their own NEPA process. Army Corps would be the same thing. But it's our understanding, and talking actually directly to the Bureau staff, that because we have spent a fair amount of time intentionally discussing all the federal issues in the EIR, that process would be pretty streamlined. Exactly what that looks like is really up to the Bureau staff. I couldn't, I would say at the worst an EA. Yeah, and we already have the technical studies to support it.
The time involved in that to get compliance to the Bureau Rec funding, is it a long term or is it a?
Yeah, actually, thank you for asking that question. I wanted to make the point related to that one of the benefits of tonight, it allows the district to move forward in actually obtaining the state and federal funding. And that can't happen unless the year is certified and the project is approved with all the appropriate stipulations in Resolution Section 11. The time frame, it's my understanding, talking to Bureau staff, it'd be on the order of a few months, not like a year or more. And that's again because we've already done the consultation, we've already done the technical studies. They may have some supplemental analysis they'd like us to do, but I think we're substantially far along that path. That's my understanding.
Great, thank you very much. I have another question I'll ask General Manager, and maybe you can deflect. And that would be under the, we've heard a lot about desire, and the community's desire being, we want to be green. You have no pun intended on the name here, but basically we're looking for alternative energy. And I just wanted to, these options 1 and options 2, 100% carbon neutral. And want to be certain that we're not limiting ourselves in technology and the types of technology, whether it's a fuel cell or whether it's a gas, specifically if it's a gas turbine or any other thing. Does that, selecting option 1 versus option 2, are we limiting ourselves in any way?
what we're starting with is the alternative energy analysis. So we are in the process, we completed a draft alternative energy analysis, but we're going back and revisiting it. We received a number of good comments from the public and from the board, and so we're bringing on another consultant to help us master plan our energy use on the site. All of that is integrated with the GHG credits. So what we're going to look for is cost effectiveness with that portfolio. We're also going to look at reliability. Eric has the dollar amounts. He's done some research into the GHG credits that we're looking at for option 1 and option 2, and we could provide the board a range of those costs per year. Granted that this is just for this period of time.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that I understand that, and I know we're not focusing on cost per our general counsel here this evening, but it's always on everybody's mind. But okay, my colleagues' concerns on I know MODOC was the real pioneer of 18 months or so. They had the 1 million gallon a day pump going out here at Doheny, so it worked very well. And I understand talking to the Monterey folks, in fact, the CalAm or the project proponent or owners up there, they did quite a bit of research. They had concern about slant wells as well, and they went into some. They hired consultants and they went out and found several slant wells that were operational. So they wanted to share that expertise with them, and so we are pleased that actually helped me feel a lot better about that. But yeah, I also want to suggest that the slant wells and the brine mixture that this project is going to undertake is really very consistent, and it's right in line with where the environmental community wants. If you're going to have a desal, this is the, I think I heard Coast Keepers say this is the right project. And the reason we say that, this is actually pursuant to the Cal EPAs and the Ocean Plan Amendment. So we're not doing anything out of the box. We're right in line with what the environmental community and the state of California is. I believe this is what they're calling the model project for California. So I'm very pleased with where we're heading on that. I believe the team has performed a remarkable task. And I know in the findings, we had to go through some alternatives. There's a no project and there's several other alternatives. But I think when I read the last couple of it's in the last couple of pages of the document, we have an environmentally superior alternative. And so with that, I'm pleased to support the project as well. And what I'm going to do, one last thing. I wanted to thank, if this project is approved, and I think this will open the door for the partnerships that make the project feasible. And also I wanted to thank the President Jacobs for coming and acknowledging, and also their general manager, Dan Ferens, is here this evening. So thank you to Santa Margarita. We appreciate that, and appreciate them considering the Doheny desalinization project in their water portfolio of 1,000 acre-feet a year. So with that, I have no further comments. But before we call any questions or go any further, unless my colleagues have some other statements, go ahead.
I don't know, no other statement, but I would like from the staff to understand if this EIR is certified tonight, does that mean we're not going to be doing any further analysis or looking at potential backup plans for the seawater intake to this project? Where's that going to leave us with respect to the with the slant wells?
Okay. So the next step, if this is approved, is to bring forward a series of workshops to the board to discuss a cost estimate that we're having prepared by a third party right now. That cost estimate should be completed in the next 2 to 3 months, where we can kick off board workshops to look at the assumptions that they used and design assumptions, design methods, and to question that. So I can see that happening over a series of workshops with the board in parallel with our permitting process that we're moving forward with. Hopefully that.
Wayne, did you have?
We're sharing mics here. I wanted to make note of one thing that I forgot to mention. And a number of people have said tonight and at other times that the water utility, South Coast, did a great job in conserving water. And I wanted to point out that's not us. It is our customers. Many of the folks sitting in this room and throughout South Laguna Beach and Dana Point. And so we need to thank all of those people. It's not South Coast that's done the conservation. So thank you all for that. And I, in reflecting more on the comments we've heard from the folks here tonight, the comments that we've addressed in the EIR, and from our colleagues on the board, I think it's really time to move forward on the resolution. So I would like to make a, pardon?
You can make the motion, but we're going to take a recess before we go into any.
That's all fine.
actions.
Okay. Would you like me to hold a motion until after the recess?
Go ahead and make the motion.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion, first of all, in favor of the staff resolution, recommendation regarding a resolution number 2918/19.
With option 2, is that?
Well, I thought we were dealing with them separately.
Okay, well, then we will.
And if we're not, I'll include option 2 because I think that's really the right thing to do from an environmental viewpoint.
Our general counsel has a comment.
One of the reasons for needing to take a recess is that we need to get our expert panel an opportunity to compare their notes relative to comments that were received tonight and either, figure out where
I'll
those.
put my motion on hold if that will.
Well, it's going to be on hold anyway. I'm just
Yes, I know.
explaining that there's.
Well, but now I'm the holder.
We need to see if there's a need to draw a little roadmap about where some of the comments have already been responded to, or if there's anything new.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Art, and thanks for your patience, board. We're going to, it's now 8:15. We're going to take 15 minutes, and we're going to start sharply at 8:30. Thank you.
They gave you the broken one.
If we could get everybody to please be seated. Before we move on with any board motions or discussions, I'm going to turn it over to our general manager, and so he and the team may want to respond to a couple of comments they heard this evening.
This is for you. I don't know why I said so.
No, this is my last one.
This is yours.
Thanks, Mr. President. We're going to respond on the record to some of the comments just to sort of put the dot on the I. Good. And then that'll be on the record and become part of the regular proceeding if we have to ever defend the decision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to start with the response to Ms. Mandy Sackett. One of the questions, a good question on 94 GPCD indoor, and it doesn't seem to be tracking the 50 or the 55 GPCD compliance criteria that's being developed by the state right now. And I need to apologize because my slide showed a 141. So that's our total demand divided by our per capita. What the state is talking about is indoor residential use. So our indoor use is actually 90. This is from fiscal year 2018. I had this chart prepared for me. It's 98.9 gallons per capita per day is what the district customers are using. So this is 98.9 gallons per capita per day. So that's the total residential indoor and outdoor use. Right now, as with most typical utilities, the indoor use is roughly 50%. So roughly 50% of what you use is outdoors. So if you divide that by 2, 98.9, it's slightly under 50 GPCD. Now, when these requirements start to take place, there's a lot more hoops we need to jump through to verify what that number is. And MODOC has been helping our agencies with the tools that we need, the technology tools. So we will be working closely with them to verify what that number is to ensure that we're in compliance with the state criteria that will be released at a future date. So that's one response. The other good comment there is Mr. Harold Breen advised us to use solar and integrate solar into this project. That is part of our preliminary design. We want to maximize solar on that site, not only on the desal site, but on the entire lot that we own, the 26 plus acres that we own. So that is definitely part of the solution and something that we are going to investigate and work with the regulating parties, the permitting parties to ensure that we can maximize solar on site. So that would conclude my responses. Kevin Thomas, the EAR consultant, will complete the rest of the responses.
Thank you, Rick. I will provide a brief response to some of the other comments received tonight, and then, of course, if the board pleases, we can elaborate further. So there was a question or comment regarding the potential effect of Doheny State Beach use, recreational use during construction. I just want to clarify there'll be no effect on marine recreational use. We're not having any open marine construction at all. The slant walls are subsurface, so no effect on surfing, no effect on the beach or swimming. And in fact, in consultation with state parks, we moved the slant walls off the beach. Originally, they were much closer to the sand where the test well was. So we moved those well off the sand, inside of the boardwalk, and actually in the kind of landscape picnic areas. So, and that'll be a very relatively small fenced area, won't have any effect on even beach sand use. And that'll all be through consultation with state parks through the encroachment permit process. There was a question on whether or not we should have used H++, which is a sea level rise scenario. It is referred to as an extreme event. It's actually so extreme, there's not even a predicted probability of it ever occurring. We were not directed to use that by the Coastal Commission in our consultation with them. Again, the design of the Doheny State Beach slant wells has already accounted for coastal hazards by the siting of it in that kind of more protected area of the beach, and the wells being moved off of the beach. The sea level rise modeling that we used in consultation with Coastal Commission, it actually has a 0.5% likelihood of even occurring, the modeling that we did use. It's a 200-year event, which is more strict than even FEMA requires. So that I believe that's the district could be confident in that. That takes us all the way out well past year 2100. And I also should note that in the Coastal Commission's own documentation, I believe, and we have Dr. Scott Jenkins here who can elaborate further, but the current sea level rise is not tracking with the H++ scenario. So we feel comfortable that the modeling we did was appropriate. We will have to go through a Coastal Commission permitting process, and if Coastal Commission staff would like us to dialogue on that further, we certainly could. There was also related to that a comment about just being aware of potential coastal armoring on portions of Doheny State Beach south of the San Juan Creek Lagoon. That the concept in the EIR is really that if slant wells are sited south of the lagoon, they would be in the campground area, not the more narrow day use area. So we're not intending to do any kind of coastal armoring at all as part of our project. There were a number of comments made regarding slant well feasibility and other issues. I just want to briefly respond to those, and then if the engineering team would like to elaborate, please do so. There was a couple questions regarding slant well feasibility, and I think the word experimental was used. I just wanted to reemphasize what was stated in the EIR, and I believe in Rick and Mark's presentation, the slant wells are not experimental. In fact, they've been the two different test wells drilled, one at our own site at Doheny State Beach, and then another one up in Monterey at Marina. As part of those projects, as Rick mentioned, there was extensive research into the slant well technology. We devoted an entire response to that in the final EIR Master Response number 4. So staff is comfortable acknowledging that with any technology there's some level of risk, but we feel confident that that technology is appropriate for the site. And again, it is the recommended approach for ocean desalination. There was a comment about brine discharge modeling not being, I'm paraphrasing, reliable, and I would emphasize that the brine modeling we're using is at the direction of the State Water Resources Control Board and the Regional Board, and modeling is based on protocol that went through an extensive brine panel workshop process that Dr. Jenkins was part of, with extensive literature review, peer review of modeling. So again, staff feels confident that the brine modeling has been done in an appropriate way. And then finally, there was a comment that the district should be pursuing what's called DPR, direct potable reuse. I would just, I think Mark touched on that, but there's no clear regulatory path for doing that in the state of California at this time, and we've not been asked to consider that by the state regulators. And with that, be happy to entertain any other questions, but from us or the team.
Thank you. I believe that concludes all the comments.
Oh. Sorry, I just wanted to add one more clarification on DPR. In the programmatic level, when it does become permitted, that's where we have put in for the flexibility so that at some point in time, if that project becomes feasible and intended for use by the various water agencies in the area, then this plant would be flexible to accept a blended flow, so you could have a combined DPR ocean desal project. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not even touching that.
Okay, thank you. Well, that takes us back. I know we have a motion that is coming off a hold, and I believe that motion was going to be for the approval of the final EIR, and together with option 2, which is the 100% carbon neutral, the resolution 29/18/19. I think also you wanted to include the adopting the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, attachment A, as well as the findings pursuant to CEQA, attachment B. Is that?
That's correct, and I'd like to slightly modify the motion. I'd like to also add, thank you, that we ask staff to develop a work program to address some of the issues that Dennis raised in his comments.
Very good. Okay, I'll second that. Any further discussion?
I would just like to, you mentioned, Bill, that someone had some numbers as to what the mitigation costs are projected to be, both for
the option A,
for
one and
option A and option B, and I don't think we've heard what those numbers are.
There we go.
Sure, I can provide those numbers. So based on some recent costs for carbon credits in the market, for net greenhouse gas offsets, if we assume a low end of $10 a metric ton, we'd be looking at about $59,000 a year. And for the 100% offset, we'll be looking at about $82,000 a year. We've been seeing numbers recently ranging from, say, $10 to $16 a metric ton. So at $10 per metric ton, we're looking at 59K versus 82. If you look at $16 a metric ton, we're looking at about 95,000 for net GHG offset, about 131,000 for the 100% offset. That's kind of the current market pricing we've been seeing.
Thank you. Going once, any final comments? Okay, and I'll call for the question. We want a roll call because the resolution's involved. So you want me to make I'll go Director Erdman.
Abstain.
Director Urkeneff.
Yes.
Director Rayfield.
Yes?
Director Erdman.
Yes.
And Director Green, yes. So that's a 4 with 1 abstention. So we have a EIR. Thank you. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to colleagues. Thank you, Art. Well done. I have one last duty this evening. Meeting's adjourned.